They pulled him from his car, hit him with lies and fake charges, until he showed them who he really was. It was late at night in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. The streets were mostly empty, aside from the soft buzz of traffic lights shifting from red to green. Jamal Winslow, a veteran assistant U.S. attorney, had just left dinner with some co-workers. He wasn't thinking about work, the courtroom, or injustice. Just about getting home. That changed when red and blue lights flashed in his rearview mirror. With a sigh, he turned on his signal, pulled over, and reached for his wallet. He hadn't been speeding. He hadn't run a red light. There was no reason to stop him, but he knew better than to expect reason. Two officers walked toward his car. Officer Kyle Driscoll, tall, broad, with a sharp military haircut, stood on the driver's side. Officer Brent Kessler, thinner but just as intimidating, took position by the passenger door. "License and registration," Driscoll said, his tone short and clipped. Jamal handed them over. "May I ask why I was stopped?" Driscoll looked at Kessler before replying. "Your tail light's out." Jamal frowned. That wasn't true. His car had just passed inspection, and he could see his brake lights glowing in the rearview mirror. "Are you sure about that?" he asked calmly. Driscoll's face tightened just a little. He leaned in. "Sir, step out of the vehicle." A slow tension spread through Jamal's body. He'd handled cases like this before, where a simple stop turned into something dangerous. His instincts said, follow orders. His experience said these cops were already pushing things too far. "I'm not stepping out unless you tell me why." Kessler smirked and placed a hand on his belt. "Because we said so." Jamal took a slow breath. He knew the law inside and out. He had studied it, enforced it, defended it, and he knew he didn't have to leave the car unless they had a legal reason. "I have the right to ask why I'm being ordered out," Driscoll snapped. He yanked the door open. "Step out, now!" Before Jamal could move, Driscoll grabbed his wrist and pulled him forward. The seatbelt dug into his shoulder. "What the hell are you doing?" Jamal shouted, trying to pull back. Driscoll said nothing. He just held on tighter. Within seconds, Kessler was on the other side, twisting Jamal's arm behind his back. Cold metal handcuffs bit into his skin. "You're resisting," Driscoll said flatly. Jamal stared in disbelief as Kessler shoved him against the hood of his own car. His heart raced, but not from fear, from anger. This was a setup, a game, and they thought they had already won, but they were about to learn just how wrong they were. "He refused to get out of the car," Driscoll said smoothly, raised his voice, made the situation dangerous. Every word was a lie. Kessler chimed in, nodding as he added. He tensed up. "We feared for our safety. We had no choice but to restrain him." More lies. Under the table, Jamal's hands tightened into fists. He had spent his whole career fighting against this exact kind of clear, obvious corruption. And now, he was the one living it. Judge Holloway looked annoyed as she glanced at Jamal's lawyer. "Anything else, Mr. Rivera?" Rivera paused. He knew this judge, knew her history. Fairness wasn't something she was known for. Still he swallowed hard and pushed on. "Yes, Your Honor, the defense calls Jamal Winslow to the stand." This was it. As Jamal stood and walked toward the witness box, he felt every eye in the room on him, watching, judging, waiting to see if he would fall apart. But he wouldn't. Because what he was about to do would change everything. He sat down, exhaled slowly as the clerk asked him to swear in. His hands rested calmly in his lap, but inside he was burning. He wasn't here to defend himself. He was here to tell the truth. Prosecutor Calloway stepped forward, pacing slightly, trying to show confidence. "Mr. Winslow, would you say you followed the officer's directions during the traffic stop?" Jamal looked at him calmly, steady. "I asked why I was being told to get out of my car. That's not against the law." Calloway let out a fake sigh. "So you refused to exit?" "I asked for a reason," Jamal said again, "which I had every legal right to do." Calloway smirked. glancing at the jury, like Jamal's calm tone was somehow a problem. "And after being told several times, you still didn't get out of the car?" "There was no legal reason for me to," Jamal replied. Calloway turned to the judge, shaking his head like this was expected. "Your Honor, it's clear the defendant—" But Jamal leaned forward, voice firm and steady. "Before we go further, I think I should share something." Silence. Calloway hesitated. Even Judge Holloway looked up, actually looked at him, for the first time. Jamal opened his briefcase. His lawyer, Rivera, tensed, unsure of what was coming. Jamal slowly pulled out his badge, a small, plain rectangle of metal that had suddenly become the most dangerous thing in that courtroom. "I'm Jamal Winslow," he said, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. "Assistant U.S. Attorney for the Southern District." The room froze. Judge Holloway's mouth parted slightly, her gavel hovering mid-air. She didn't bring it down. The officers stiffened. Kessler's knee started bouncing. Driscoll's jaw clenched. Calloway went pale. I'm sorry," Calloway stammered. Jamal tilted his head. "Did I stutter?" The energy in the room shifted. Jurors leaned forward. The court reporter stopped typing. Even Rivera looked like he'd been hit by a truck. "You're a federal prosecutor?" Calloway's voice cracked just a little. Jamal held up his ID. "That's what it says, doesn't it?" And just like that, the entire case crumbled. Judge Holloway leaned back in her chair, her lips pressing into a thin, tight line. She knew that if she ruled against Jamal now, if she ignored his testimony and sided with those officers, this wouldn't be a quiet case. It would be a scandal. This wasn't just a courtroom anymore. It was a powder keg, and Jamal had just lit the match. No one moved, no one breathed. Judge Holloway's grip on her gavel tightened, but she didn't bring it down. Not yet. She was thinking, calculating. This wasn't just another case. It was a career-ending disaster waiting to happen. Calloway swallowed hard. His usual arrogance was gone. He turned toward the officers. And for the first time, Driscoll and Kessler looked worried. Jamal sat still, watching them all try to take back control. He'd seen this before, in meetings, in closed-door conversations, when the wrong kind of case landed in someone's hands. But this time, he was the one who forced them to face it. I wasn't aware of this," Calloway stuttered, flipping through papers like he might find an exit hidden between the lines. "Your Honor, Judge Holloway raised a hand. He fell silent immediately. She locked eyes with Jamal. His presence alone had become a threat. A federal prosecutor, falsely arrested, assaulted, and lied about. Had no one noticed? 3. He could have been another nameless statistic, and she knew it. Judge Holloway turned to the officers. "Driscoll, Kessler." Both men sat up straighter, like schoolboys waiting for a scolding. "Would you like to amend your statements?" Silence. A small crack in their polished armor. Jamal could see it happening. Driscoll's fingers clenched around his knee. Kessler glanced at Calloway, hoping for backup, but Jamal spoke before either of them could. "Before they answer that, Your Honor, I'd like to request the court pull dispatch call logs from the night of my arrest." Calloway flinched. Jamal wasn't making a wild guess. He knew exactly how this worked. If the officers had radioed in before the stop, their story about the taillight might fall apart. If they hadn't, they had broken protocol from the beginning. Judge Holloway stared at him for a long moment. She was cornered. Deny the request and she'd be accused of covering for them. Approve it, and she handed Jamal the final nail for their coffin. He could have been another nameless statistic, and she knew it. Judge Holloway turned to the officers. "Driscoll, Kessler." Both men sat up straighter, like schoolboys waiting for a scolding. "Would you like to amend your statements?" Silence. A small crack in their polished armor. Jamal could see it happening. Driscoll's fingers clenched around his knee. Kessler glanced at Calloway, hoping for backup, but Jamal spoke before either of them could. "Before they answer that, Your Honor, I'd like to request the court pull dispatch call logs from the night of my arrest." Calloway flinched. Jamal wasn't making a wild guess. He knew exactly how this worked. If the officers had radioed in before the stop, their story about the taillight might fall apart. If they hadn't, they had broken protocol from the beginning. She cleared her throat. "Request granted." Driscoll exhaled sharply. His cool broke. Kessler shifted in his seat, jaw clenched. They knew what was coming. Jamal leaned back. And he wasn't done, because this case wasn't staying in that courtroom. It started with a single reporter in the back row, a young journalist from the Baton Rouge Advocate typing furiously on her laptop. Within hours, the story spread. By morning, Jamal's name was everywhere. Assistant U.S. Attorney, wrongfully arrested by Baton Rouge cops, federal prosecutor, exposes corruption in open court, judge under fire for ruling against black defendant, who was a government lawyer. Social media erupted. Clips from the trial, filmed by observers, circulated like wildfire. The moment Jamal revealed his badge became a viral symbol, broadcast on every major news outlet. But the biggest shift happened in Baton Rouge. Community activists organized rallies, protesters filled the streets outside the courthouse, civil rights attorneys began digging through Judge Holloway's old cases looking for patterns. And they found them. Then came the bombshell. An anonymous leak. Internal police emails, arrest reports, radio logs, and quiet warnings shared between officers. Messages on how to justify shaky stops. Testimonies from other black drivers who'd been pulled over for imaginary violations, then threatened when they questioned it. It wasn't just Jamal anymore, it was a system, a pattern. One that had operated in the shadows for years, and now the lights were on. But the people in power weren't going quietly. The backlash came fast. City officials scrambled. The Baton Rouge Police Department issued a carefully crafted statement. Judge Holloway's office stopped returning calls. Within the week, the department announced an internal investigation, but Jamal knew the script. He'd seen these empty gestures before. This time, it wasn't enough. A civil rights firm filed a federal lawsuit on behalf of dozens of past victims. Community leaders demanded Judge Holloway be removed from the bench. The protests didn't stop. And then came the moment that changed everything. The case was handed over to the Louisiana Attorney General. Jamal sat in his apartment watching the press conference on TV. His phone buzzed non-stop. Calls from reporters, lawyers, and people who'd lived this story too, but never had a badge to protect them. This wasn't damage control anymore. The system was running out of places to hide, and Judge Holloway knew it. By the time Jamal returned to court for the verdict, her expression had changed. No more cool indifference, no more subtle smirks. She was staring at a case too big to bury, and had to choose which side of history to stand on. Would it be justice, or just another strategic move to preserve the illusion of it? The courtroom was silent. Judge Holloway cleared her throat. The weight of the last few weeks hung on her shoulders. The protests, the headlines, the leaked files. There were no good options left. She glanced down at her notes, but everyone knew this wasn't her decision anymore. It belonged to the people watching. She exhaled, then set her gavel down softly. "After reviewing the evidence," she said, "the court finds the defendant..." A pause. Just one breath. "Not guilty." A wave of relief surged through Jamal. But he didn't move, didn't smile, didn't celebrate, because this case had never been just about him. The officers sat stiffly, their faces pale. Kessler's hands were clenched, his career flashing before his eyes. Driscoll, always the more arrogant, leaned forward. "Your Honor, we..." Judge Holloway raised a hand, silencing him. "The court will also be forwarding all relevant materials to the state attorney's office for further review." That was it. They weren't walking away from this. The courtroom erupted, murmurs, gasps, the rapid fire of reporters' keyboards. For the first time, the system had turned its gaze back on itself. Jamal stood slowly. His lawyer patted him on the back, but Jamal's eyes weren't on him. They were on the officers, On Calloway, the prosecutor, who now looked like a man who had lost everything. On the judge, who had dismissed so many cases like his until she had no choice. But mostly, Jamal thought about the people who weren't in that room, the ones who sat in that same defendant's chair, the ones who didn't get to walk free. As he stepped out of the courtroom, the cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. The crowd cheered, but Jamal didn't smile. He wasn't celebrating because this wasn't a victory. This was proof of what had always been happening. And only now, with the world watching, had the system been forced to respond. The fight wasn't over, not for him, not for the people still trapped in it. He stepped past the flashing lights and into a sea of raised voices, people demanding real change because one case wasn't enough. And now, finally, nobody was looking away. If this story made you pause even for a second, then ask yourself, how many more stories are out there? How many names never made the news? How many truths never got heard? It's not enough to see injustice. We have to challenge it. So if you believe justice means holding power accountable, share this story, talk about it, pay attention, because the more people who refuse to look away, the harder it becomes for these cases to be swept under the rug. And that's how change begins.